The rhythmic crash of waves against the Oregon coast is a sound that usually soothes, but on that crisp autumn morning in 1977, it served as a lonely soundtrack to an ungraspable horror. A pristine beach house, designed for quiet contemplation, became a gaping void where two lives had simply ceased to be. The sheer impossibility of it all haunts the coastline still. A father and his 8-year-old daughter, Arthur and Lily Peterson, vanished. Not lost, not missing, but utterly gone from a locked house. 48 years later, a discovery would pry open this wound, revealing a truth so chilling, it rewrote the narrative of their vanishing, confirming the deepest, most terrifying fears of those left behind. A mental image that remains indelibly etched is not of the house itself, but of the profound, impossible emptiness within it. Arthur Peterson, a kind but world-weary architect, sought a sanctuary for himself and his daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed child who adored her stuffed rabbit, Barnaby. They arrived at the secluded Seabreeze rental on Friday evening, seeking a weekend of undisturbed connection before the harsh realities of Arthur's recent divorce pulled them back to separate lives. Saturday morning saw them building sandcastles, Arthur sharing his fascination with the ocean's secrets with Lily, her small hands sketching a seagull with earnest concentration. By noon, Arthur was diligently mending a loose railing. Yet, when the neighbor's family departed around 2:00 p.m., Lily and Arthur were still there, the house secured from the outside. Sunday morning brought not a happy phone call, but a chilling notification from the rental agency. Arthur hadn't checked out. How could a father and daughter vanish from a seemingly secure, locked beach house, leaving behind Arthur's wallet and keys, and Lily's treasured Barnaby nestled on her pillow? It defied all logic, sparking an immediate, agonizing quest for answers that would stretch for decades. The initial search, a desperate sweep of sand and sea, yielded nothing. Sheriff Brody, a man out of his depth, could only scratch his head. This wasn't a simple case of misadventure, it was an enigma wrapped in the vastness of the Pacific. The very air seemed to have swallowed them whole. But what investigators would uncover 48 years later shielded into the bone, revealing a calculated, sinister, far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Disturbing evidence, unearthed from a hidden compartment, spoke of a father's growing paranoia, a child's innocent dread captured in a chilling drawing, and a piece of technology that simply shouldn't have existed in 1977. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a carefully orchestrated extraction, hinting at a conspiracy that reached into the darkest corners of human nature, promising explanations that would shatter the peace of their final weekend. Lily, with her innocent wonder, and Arthur, with his quiet hopes for a new beginning, were more than just names in a case file. They were fragments of lives abruptly and brutally extinguished. For Sarah Peterson, Lily's mother, every passing year was an eternity of grief and unanswered questions, a constant ache that no amount of time could dull. She never stopped searching, her hope a flickering ember against the encroaching darkness. Arthur and Lily's bond, forged in the precious hours of that weekend retreat, became the haunting testament to a love cut tragically short. Their story resonated deeply, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of children and the protective love of a parent, amplified by the shattering reality that their vanishing impacted not just one family, but a constellation of shattered lives, each desperately seeking a sliver of truth. Join us as we delve into the baffling case of Lily and Arthur Peterson. Stay with us to uncover the shocking truths unearthed decades later, truths that will make you question everything you thought you knew about disappearances. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and prepare yourself for the full, chilling story that must be told. The revelation is coming, and it's more horrific than you can possibly imagine. Chapter 2. The protagonist S. On that crisp autumn morning in 1977, the Oregon coast held its breath. Arthur Peterson, a man whose quiet strength was often overshadowed by a subtle weariness, was 42 years old. His hands, accustomed to the precise lines of architectural blueprints, now gently guided his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, as she meticulously sketched a seagull. Lily, a whirlwind of bright curiosity with eyes that mirrored the vastness of the Pacific, clutched her worn stuffed rabbit, Barnaby, its fur smoothed by countless nights of comfort. Lily was Arthur's world, a sunbeam penetrating the lingering shadows of his recent divorce. Her laughter, a melody Arthur desperately clung to, had filled their secluded Seabreeze rental with a warmth that seemed to push back the encroaching chill of the season. He saw in her a future, a chance for a restart, a sanctuary built not of brick and mortar, but of shared moments and unwavering love. For Arthur, Lily wasn't just his daughter, she was the embodiment of everything pure and true, a precious gift he was determined to protect at all costs. Their weekend retreat was meant to be a buffer, a pocket of peace before reality resumed its demanding pace. Arthur, meticulous as ever, had planned their escape with the precision of a seasoned architect. Friday evening had seen them arrive, the scent of salt and pine welcoming them. Saturday morning was a symphony of simple joys, building sandcastles that defied the tide for fleeting moments. Arthur sharing hushed tales of the ocean's hidden depths with Lily, her small hands gripping a crayon as she captured the spirit of a soaring bird. Arthur, ever practical, had spent a portion of the late morning reinforcing a slightly loose railing on the deck, a small task for a man who found solace in order. Lily's presence was a constant, a vibrant splash of color against the muted coastal palette. She'd been drawn to the porch swing, a blanket tucked around her, her attention riveted by the world unfolding before her. The neighbor's departing car, a distant hum fading into the wind, marked the last known footprint of their presence, leaving an echo of normalcy in its wake. Arthur was a man of profound, yet understated, integrity. He was known for his quiet dedication to his work, his colleagues remembering him as dependable, if not overly gregarious. His sensitivity, however, was often masked by a calm exterior. His ex-wife, Sarah, though separated, spoke of his deep paternal instincts, the fierce protectiveness he held for Lily. He'd move mountains for her, she'd say, her voice tinged with both remembrance and pain. Lily, in turn, adored her father, his explanations of the natural world igniting her imagination. She was never happier than when she was with him, absorbing his quiet wisdom, her small hand nestled in his. Their bond wasn't just familial. It was a profound connection built on shared vulnerability and an unspoken understanding. Arthur valued honesty and resilience. Lily embodied innocence and boundless joy. These were not people prone to impulse or recklessness. They were anchors, too deeply rooted in their shared world and mutual affection to simply drift away. Arthur's dreams for the future were deeply intertwined with Lily's well-being. He envisioned a stable, loving environment for her, a life free from the discord that had fractured his marriage. He even spoken to Sarah about the possibility of joint custody arrangements that would allow for longer, more frequent stays with him, especially during school breaks. He was planning a surprise birthday party for Lily later that year, a detailed itinerary already in his head, complete with a custom-made treehouse he'd sketched designs for. He felt a responsibility not only to Lily, but to ensure his mistakes in his personal life wouldn't cast a shadow on her future. Lily, in her childlike way, dreamt of exploring every tide pool, of collecting every colorful shell, and of one day understanding how Lily the seagull she'd drawn could fly so high, a dream Arthur encouraged with patient explanations. Their lives were filled with the quiet hum of routine, the hopeful anticipation of shared future moments, and the comforting weight of everyday responsibilities. The sheer impossibility of Arthur and Lily Peterson simply vanishing from a locked beach house was precisely what made their disappearance so unfathomable. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no indication of a planned departure. Arthur's wallet, containing cash and his identification, lay on the kitchen counter, alongside his keys. Lily's beloved Barnaby, a silent testament to her presence, was found resting peacefully on her pillow. Arthur was a man who documented everything, a creature of habit, careful planning. Lily was a child who thrived on routine and the comforting presence of her father. Their connection, so tangible and present on that fateful Saturday, was an unbreakable cord. There was no debt, no despair, no indication of mental instability that would suggest a voluntary flight from their lives. They were a unit, their disappearance together even more profoundly inexplicable. To imagine them leaving behind such personal touchstones, such tangible proof of their existence, was to defy the very essence of who they were. They were not people who would fade into the elements. They were lights that shone too brightly to be extinguished without a trace. The Oregon coast in autumn was a symphony of muted colors and primal sounds. At Seabreeze, the rental house where Arthur and Lily Peterson spent their last known hours, the air tasted of salt and pine, a bracing tonic that cloaked the stark beauty of the shoreline. The house itself was a modest structure, weathered by relentless sea winds, perched precariously on a bluff overlooking a wide sweep of beach. A single, narrow track, more mud than gravel, snaked inland, disappearing into a dense, silent forest of Douglas fir and Sitka spruce. This isolation, a deliberate choice by Arthur, meant that neighbors were few and far between, a scattered collection of small cabins and weathered homes, each a solitary sentinel against the vast expanse of the Pacific. The nearest town, a small fishing village named Newport, lay a good 20 miles down the coast, a place of shingle-clad houses, creaking docks, and the ceaseless cry of gulls. Even here, life moved at a slower, more deliberate pace, dictated by the rhythm of the tides and the whims of the weather. The very landscape seemed to whisper secrets, its ruggedness a constant reminder of nature's formidable power, capable of both breathtaking beauty and unforgiving erasure. The year 1977 was a time of transition, a bridge between older traditions and the nascent stirrings of a future driven by technology that felt both exciting and alien. For Arthur and Lily, this coastal retreat was an escape from the anxieties of a changing world and a collapsing marriage. While the nation grappled with economic uncertainties and the lingering fallout of political upheaval, their world was confined to the immediate, the tangible. Cell phones were the stuff of science fiction, long-distance calls were expensive necessities, and communication relied on landlines and handwritten letters. Security was a matter of locked doors and trusting neighbors. The social fabric of these coastal communities was tightly woven, built on a shared dependence and a tacit understanding of mutual support. Yet, beneath the veneer of rustic charm and neighborly camaraderie lay a deep-seated resilience and an unspoken tolerance for solitude. It was a simpler time, perhaps, but also one where the absence of constant surveillance and digital footprints left vast, uncharted territories for mystery to occupy. The community around Seabreeze was a testament to this blend of isolation and interdependence. Arthur, meticulous in his planning, had chosen the rental precisely for its quietude. He and Lily were a temporary addition to a long-established ecosystem. Their nearest neighbors, the Johnsons, a family with children Lily's age, were friendly but respectful of their privacy. They saw Arthur as a quiet, decent man, clearly devoted to his daughter, a welcome sight after years of seeing the house vacant. Arthur's ex-wife, Sarah, was only connected to this place through Arthur and Lily's presence. She lived hundreds of miles away, her world now entirely separate, her only link to this Oregon coast the agonizing hope that Arthur had at last found some peace for them both. The local sheriff, Brody, a man who knew every pothole on the county roads and every resident's peculiar habit, typified the era's law enforcement. Well-intentioned, but often outmatched by the sheer scale and wildness of the Oregon landscape. His authority was rooted in familiarity, in knowing the people and the territory, but this case would stretch that familiarity to its breaking point. Within this seemingly idyllic setting, subtle elements of vulnerability lay dormant, waiting for an unseen trigger. Arthur's meticulous nature, his architectural precision, also bred a certain caution, a sensitivity to the underlying structures of things. His journal, later discovered, would reveal a growing unease, a sense that their sanctuary was not as impermeable as he had hoped. The wildness of the Pacific Northwest, while beautiful, was also inherently dangerous. Coastal storms could erupt with terrifying speed, eroding cliffs and concealing truths beneath tempestuous waves. The dense forests offered a natural, impenetrable shield, but also a perfect place for things and people to disappear without a trace. There were whispers among the locals, hushed tones shared over coffee at the general store of unexplained occurrences over the years, of strange lights seen offshore or unusual patterns in the vast, empty stretches of beach after a storm. These were dismissed as local folklore, the tall tales of men who spent too much time at sea, but they contributed to an underlying narrative of mystery that clung to the coast like the persistent sea mist. The stage was thus set for Arthur and Lily's brief, sun-drenched sojourn. Their routines, so comforting and predictable, shared meals, explorations of tide pools, quiet evenings reading, slotted perfectly into the natural rhythms of Seabreeze. Arthur's mending of the railing was an act of domestic normalcy, a father's quiet care for his child's safety. Lily's drawing of the seagull was an innocent testament to her fascination with the world around her, a world Arthur was trying to make magical for her, even amidst his personal turmoil. The house, secured from the outside as they prepared for their meal, offered a false sense of impenetrable security. The wind howled, the waves crashed, and the vast, indifferent ocean churned in the distance, unaware of the fragile bubble of normalcy that was about to burst. The beauty of the setting, the very elements that drew Arthur and Lily there for peace and connection, would soon become the backdrop for an inexplicable vanishing, turning beloved routines into chilling precursors to an unfathomable event. The air in the Seabreeze rental house, thick with the scent of stale salt and pine needles, registered a crisp 48 degrees Fahrenheit as Arthur Peterson peeled back the duvet at 7:03 a.m. on Saturday, October 15, 1977. Beside him, Lily slept soundly, her small form a warm weight against the mattress, Barnaby clutched protectively in her arms. The dawn, pale and watery, painted oblique stripes across the worn floorboards, a stark contrast to the vibrant colors Arthur envisioned for Lily's future. Outside, the Pacific, a restless, gray expanse, began its daily percussion, each wave a slow, deliberate sigh against the shore. Arthur's first act was to check the bedside clock, 7:05 a.m. He knew the schedule, Lily's favorite scrambled eggs, a quick glance at the local tide charts, and then the beach. He pulled on a worn flannel shirt, the familiar roughness a comfort against the faint chill that permeated their temporary haven. Nothing in the pre-dawn quiet, the predictable rhythm of Arthur's breathing, or Lily's peaceful slumber, hinted at the catastrophic rupture just hours away. This morning, like any other weekend morning for the two of them, began with an unwavering, almost sacred, normalcy. At precisely 7:23 a.m., Arthur flipped the switch on the small kitchen stove, the gas burner igniting with a soft hiss. Lily, now awake and dressed in her favorite blue overalls, padded into the kitchen, her bare feet silent on the linoleum. Her eyes, still half closed with sleep, widened with an anticipatory smile as Arthur presented her with a plate piled high with fluffy scrambled eggs. "Good morning, sunshine." Arthur's voice was a low rumble, laced with the quiet affection that had become their hallmark. Lily responded with a sleepy chirp, her attention already divided between her breakfast and the worn stuffed rabbit. Barnaby, perched on the windowsill, seemingly watching the rising sun. Arthur, meanwhile, ate his own eggs standing by the counter, a steaming mug of black coffee in his hand. He consulted the tide chart, noting the low tide around 11:15 a.m., perfect for exploring the rock pools. Lily, finishing her meal, pointed to the window. "Daddy, Barnaby wants to see the seagulls." Arthur chuckled, lifting Barnaby from the sill and placing him in Lily's waiting arms. Lily murmured a thank you to her father, her small hands already smoothing Barnaby's matted fur, a ritual as familiar as breathing. "We'll go see them soon, sweetie," Arthur promised, gathering their jackets and Lily's small red bucket and spade. By 8:55 a.m., Arthur and Lily were on the beach, the cool sand yielding beneath their feet. Arthur, demonstrating with a practiced hand, began building a sturdy sandcastle, its turrets meticulously shaped. Lily, a blur of energetic concentration, immediately set about digging a moat, her spade a miniature echo of Arthur's larger one. Around 10:00 a.m., Mrs. Johnson, their nearest neighbor, a woman with kind eyes and a permanently wind-chapped face, walked her dog along the beach and waved. Lily, her face streaked with sand, waved back enthusiastically, her laughter carried on the brisk ocean breeze. Arthur paused his construction, offering a polite nod. "Mrs. Johnson called out, enjoying the day, Arthur." "Immensely. Mary," he replied, his voice carrying clearly. This would be their last confirmed interaction with an outsider. Arthur then noticed a slight wobble in the railing of the beach house deck. At 11:47 a.m., he declared it was time for a break, returning to the house with Lily for a shared sandwich and a brief respite from the sun. Lily, a little tired from her energetic digging, curled up on the porch swing with Barnaby, a light blanket tucked around her small shoulders. Arthur, meanwhile, retrieved his toolbox. At 12:52 p.m., Arthur Peterson was seen by Mrs. Johnson, who was packing her family into their car to depart for an afternoon engagement, actively engaged in bracing the slightly loose railing on the deck of the Seabreeze rental. He was focused, his movements deliberate and efficient, the very picture of a responsible father. Lily was not visible at this moment, but Mrs. Johnson surmised she was likely inside. Arthur offered a brief wave as their car pulled away, his own tools laid out neatly beside him. This sighting at 12:52 p.m. marked the last affirmative visual confirmation of Arthur and Lily's presence at the beach house. Everything that followed, the quiet assumption that they were still within, the locked house, the left-behind wallet and keys, and Barnaby nestled on Lily's pillow would become the foundation of an unyielding, agonizing mystery. The air, so recently filled with the sounds of their simple routines, settled into an unnerving stillness as the afternoon wore on, the house itself becoming a silent, impenetrable vault holding secrets no one could fathom. By 2:00 p.m., the coast road was empty of the Johnsons' car, their departure a final punctuation mark on the day's lingering normalcy. Arthur and Lily were expected to call Lily's mother, Sarah, by late afternoon, as was their habit, a brief check-in to confirm their well-being. The house stood, doors secured, windows shut against the lingering chill, an illusion of undisturbed peace. The ocean continued its relentless rhythm, oblivious. It wasn't until Sunday, October 16th, when Sarah Peterson, increasingly anxious as the hours ticked by without the customary phone call, contacted the rental agency that a chilling realization began to dawn. The rental agency, confirming that Arthur hadn't returned the key as agreed, alerted Sheriff Brody. The meticulous order of Saturday had dissolved into the terrifying void of Sunday morning's unanswered questions. The transition from a perfect, uneventful Saturday to the chilling enigma of Sunday was instantaneous and absolute. The telephone in Sarah Peterson's Portland apartment rang at 4:17 p.m. on Sunday, October 16, 1977. It was a Sunday afternoon ritual, Arthur calling to confirm Lily was safe and happy. But this time, the silence that followed the ringing was punctuated by a voice that was not Arthur's but a clipped, impersonal tone from the Seabreeze rental agency. "Mom, I'm afraid we have a slight issue. Mr. Peterson hasn't returned the keys as arranged, and he's not answering his phone. Is there any chance you know his whereabouts?" Sarah's heart, which had been managing a low hum of persistent worry, suddenly leaped into a frantic, disorienting rhythm. She stammered out that Arthur and Lily were on their weekend getaway, that he was always punctual, always reliable. An hour later, after repeated attempts to reach Arthur's cell phone, a luxury he rarely used anyway, but she tried. The rental agency called back, relaying the rental office's own failed attempts to contact the Petersons' last known location. The vague unease began to coalesce into a cold dread. By 7:00 p.m., with no word from Arthur, not even a voicemail, Sarah was pacing her living room, her initial rationalizations. A dead phone battery, Arthur engrossed in his repair work, maybe he decided to stay an extra day at the last minute, crumbling under the sheer weight of his uncharacteristic silence. The protective instincts that had always warred with her grief surged, transforming mere concern into the first tendril of fear. By 10:30 p.m., Sarah's worry had escalated to a palpable panic. She had called Arthur's sister, Martha, who also hadn't heard from him. Martha's initial dismissiveness. "Oh, Arthur's probably just lost track of time. You know how he gets when he's focused," was quickly replaced by a shared anxiety as Sarah relayed the rental agency's information and her own escalating fears. Together, they pored over Arthur's known habits, ticking off every possible scenario, each one feeling more dreadful than the last. At 11:18 p.m., Sarah made the gut-wrenching call to the local sheriff's department in Seaside, Oregon, the jurisdiction covering Seabreeze. Her voice trembled as she explained the situation to the dispatcher, the words "my husband and daughter they're missing from a locked house" tumbling out in a rush. The dispatcher, a calm voice in the storm, listened patiently, noting Arthur's age, description, Lily's age and description, their last known location. There was a pause on the line as she consulted protocols, a subtle but unmistakable resistance. "Mom, are you sure they haven't just gone for a walk? It's a holiday weekend. Sometimes people lose track of things." Sarah's desperation was raw. No, Arthur would never just leave Lily. And the house was locked. They vanished. "Please, my daughter is just 8 years old." The dispatcher, perhaps hearing the genuine terror in Sarah's voice, agreed to dispatch a deputy to the Seabreeze property for a welfare check. The uniformed deputy, a young man named Reynolds, arrived at Seabreeze around 1:00 a.m. Monday morning. The deserted beach house, under the harsh glare of his headlights, seemed eerily still. The doors were indeed locked, the windows secured against the relentless coastal breeze. A cursory look through the windows revealed no obvious signs of distress, no overturned furniture, nothing to indicate a struggle. He reported his findings back to Sheriff Brody, who was already aware of the call. Sheriff Brody, a man whose career had primarily involved disputes over fishing quotas and minor scuffles, was already feeling out of his depth. He dispatched Reynolds on the welfare check, a routine first step, but the circumstances, a locked house, no obvious sign of departure, and 2 people missing, felt far beyond the usual missing person report. He instructed Reynolds to attempt to contact the rental agency for a spare key and to conduct a more thorough, though still external, examination of the property. The initial theory, a quiet one whispered among dispatchers and on the radio waves, was that perhaps the couple had simply taken an impromptu late-night stroll and gotten caught in the unexpectedly treacherous coastal fog, a familiar hazard in the area. By dawn on Monday, October 17th, the reality of the situation had begun to dawn on Sheriff Brody. Reynolds had gained entry into the house with the spare key provided by the rental agency. The findings were baffling. Arthur's wallet, keys, and Lily's beloved stuffed rabbit, Barnaby, were all found inside, exactly where Sarah had described. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of a struggle, no note. The house was meticulously tidy, as if undisturbed. The minimal forensic capability of the Seaside PD meant that even if there were subtle signs, they would likely be missed. Brody authorized a preliminary canvass of the immediate neighbors, discovering the Johnsons' departure the previous afternoon, their vague sighting of Arthur working on the railing at 12:52 p.m. A concrete left no activity, but not a definitive last sighting of Arthur and Lily together. He assigned Deputy Reynolds to create a timeline of the Petersons' known movements, a task that felt futile given the vanishing point was the undisturbed house itself. The initial theories began to broaden. An accident, perhaps an unforeseen rockfall during a nighttime excursion, or an improbable abduction by a transient individual. The critical first 48 hours, the window where survival rates for missing persons are highest, were already slipping away, leaving a gnawing sense of helplessness. The following day, Tuesday, October 18th, saw an escalation. Sheriff Brody, recognizing this was far beyond his department's capacity, officially requested assistance from the Oregon State Police OSB. The OSB detachment, with more resources and a dedicated missing persons unit, began reviewing the initial reports, their own preliminary theories leaning towards a bizarre accident or an opportunistic crime. The discovery of Barnaby on Lily's pillow, a detail that seemed almost staged, coupled with Arthur's wallet and keys left behind, pointed away from voluntary departure. Theories ranging from an elaborate abduction to a meticulously planned murder began to surface among the investigators. They conducted more in-depth interviews with the Johnsons and began a systematic grid search of the immediate coastline and the dense forest bordering the property, deploying K-9 units and volunteers. The lack of any digital footprint, any cell phone pings or credit card activity amplified the investigators' frustrations. Public interest began to stir, whispers of the mysterious disappearance spreading through local media, but the full weight of the tragedy and the baffling impossibility of it had yet to truly sink in. The initial search, while methodical, felt like searching for a needle in an infinite haystack, a frustrating prelude to a far more complex and horrifying investigation. The frantic call to Sheriff Brody on Monday morning, October 17, 1977, ignited a chain reaction that quickly swelled beyond the quiet confines of Seaside, Oregon. Sarah Peterson's primal fear, amplified by the rental agency's confirmation of Arthur and Lily's unexplained continued presence at Seabreeze, had already set the wheels of local law enforcement in motion. But as Deputy Reynolds' initial report painted a picture of an undisturbed, locked house with Arthur's wallet and Lily's cherished Barnaby still inside, it became clear this was no ordinary missing persons case. Sheriff Brody, a man accustomed to stray dogs and occasional bar brawls, felt the ground shift beneath him. He immediately contacted the Oregon State Police, requesting assistance. Within hours, the small, rugged coastline transformed into a hive of activity. State troopers, their distinctive patrol cars a stark contrast to the familiar local vehicles, began arriving, establishing a temporary command post at the nearest community hall, a modest building usually hosting bake sales and town meetings. The air, normally filled with the cries of gulls and the roar of the surf, now buzzed with radios, shouted commands, and a low hum of approaching helicopters. The news spread like wildfire through the coastal communities. Friends of Arthur, scattered across the state from his architectural projects, heard Sarah's increasingly desperate pleas. Lily's classmates and their parents, their initial shock turning to unified concern, mobilized their own networks. Spontaneous search parties began to form, comprised of weathered fishermen with intimate knowledge of the treacherous shorelines, hikers who knew the dense inland forests like the back of their hands, and everyday citizens moved by the sheer terror of a father and child vanishing without a trace. Someone set up a makeshift command center in the back room of the local diner, overflowing with maps, coffee pots, and increasingly worn-out volunteers. Divers, organized by a local dive shop owner who'd known Arthur from intermittent visits, arrived with their gear, ready to comb the unforgiving ocean floor. Cyclists, familiar with the remote coastal trails, offer their services for rapid reconnaissance. Each new group, each wave of volunteers fueled a collective hope, a desperate determination to bring Arthur and Lily home. Their shared urgency was palpable, a palpable force pushing back against the encroaching despair. The proportional escalation of Sheriff Brody's initial call turned into a full-scale interagency mobilization. By Tuesday, October 18th, the Oregon State Police OSP had commandeered the community hall, transforming it into a proper command center, complete with mobile radios, detailed topographical maps, and a growing staff of investigators. The OSB's Missing Persons Unit, experienced with complex cases, began coordinating the efforts, establishing clear search perimeters that stretched for miles along the coastline and inland. Helicopters, both from the OSB and the Coast Guard, began a systematic aerial sweep of the area, their rotor wash a constant drone above the surf. K-9 units, their handlers their own, joined the ground search, sniffing out any residual scent trails. Sophisticated sonar equipment was brought in, targeting the waters off the beach, hoping to detect any anomalies on the seabed that might indicate the presence of Arthur or Lily, or their remains. Drones, a nascent technology still in its early stages, were deployed for low-altitude photography, capturing detailed imagery of the terrain, looking for anything out of place. The organized grid search was a monumental undertaking, dividing the vast coastline and dense, unforgiving forest into manageable sectors, each assigned to a specific team of law enforcement officers, forest rangers, and civilian volunteers. The coordination between these disparate forces was a testament to the shared urgency, and your military operation focused on a single, devastating objective: finding Arthur and Lily. The initial days were a flurry of activity, each discovery, no matter how small, igniting a spark of hope then quickly dissolving into disappointment. Searchers combed the beaches from dawn till dusk. They found a child's brightly colored bucket and spade near a cluster of weathered rocks, sending a surge of adrenaline through the search teams until Sarah Peterson tearfully confirmed they belonged to Lily. A few days later, a torn piece of fabric, snagged on a thorny bush deep within the coastal woods, sparked hope for a potential clue to Arthur's presence, but forensic analysis revealed it was from a common outdoor jacket, unrelated to Arthur's known attire. Investigators meticulously cataloged every item of flotsam and jetsam with the shore, driftwood, fishing nets, discarded pathway bottles, meticulously noting their provenance, searching for anything that might be carried by Arthur or Lily. Witnesses were systematically interviewed, the Johnsons, their accounts scrutinized for any missed detail. Residents of neighboring cabins, some of whom reported hearing unusual sounds on Saturday night, claims too vague to be actionable. A fisherman on a passing boat claimed to have seen a small dinghy far offshore, but his sighting was uncorroborated and his description too generalized. These fragments of information, initially perceived as vital leads, ultimately proved to be red herrings, scattering the investigative focus and deepening the emotional cycle of hope followed by despair, leaving the families and investigators increasingly weary. The sheer scale of the operation was daunting, compounded by the unforgiving nature of the Oregon coast. The vast, untamed wilderness presented immense challenges. Rough terrain, dense undergrowth, and the ever-present threat of unpredictable weather patterns hampered ground searches. The Pacific Ocean served as a relentless, shifting obstacle. Tides erased any potential tracks left on the beach, and powerful currents hit any submerged evidence. The technological limitations of 1977 became starkly apparent. Without GPS, communication was often unreliable, and the accuracy of mapping efforts was impacted by varying coordinates and approximations. Funding for such an extensive, protracted search was a growing concern. Resources were stretched thin, with local law enforcement budgets struggling to keep pace with the demands of supporting interagency efforts. The sheer volume of the search area was overwhelming. Miles of coastline, hundreds of square miles of dense forest, and the vast, inscrutable ocean. It quickly became evident that the initial, intensive search, while meticulously organized, was simply a drop in the vast ocean of unknowns. They were searching for two people in an environment that actively seemed to swallow them whole, a task that was quickly becoming logistically and emotionally unsustainable. As the initial surge of volunteers and the high-octane efforts of the OSB began to plateau, the first signs of wear started to manifest. The sheer physical and emotional toll of the daily search, the relentless cycle of finding nothing, began to wear down even the most dedicated individuals. Many volunteers, having taken time off from work and families, started to return to their own lives, their initial urgency giving way to a gnawing, prolonged anxiety. Budgetary pressures on the Oregon State Police became a serious consideration. The cost of maintaining search teams, helicopters, and specialized equipment was astronomical, and questions began to arise about the long-term sustainability of such a massive operation. Discussions, hushed at first, then more openly, began within the command center about the feasibility of scaling back the active search. While the case would undoubtedly continue as a high-priority cold case, the immediate, all-encompassing mobilization was proving difficult to maintain indefinitely. The realization was dawning that Arthur and Lily Peterson had not simply disappeared. They had been erased, leaving behind a mystery that was far deeper and far more terrifying than anyone could have initially imagined, and that finding them, or even definitive answers, would require patience and persistence that would test everyone involved to their limits. The autumns bled into winters, then into springs and summers with a relentless, uncaring rhythm. The flurry of activity that surrounded Seabreeze in October 1977 gradually subsided, the helicopters grounded, the volunteers dispersed. Sheriff Brody, his initial bewilderment replaced by a weary resignation, officially transferred the Peterson case files to the Oregon State Police's Cold Case Unit in the spring of 1978, 3 years after the initial disappearance. The hope that had fueled the frantic searches curdled into a dull ache of acceptance. The initial 26 investigators assigned to the case had dwindled to a single detective, Detective Miles Corbin, whose job it was to meticulously catalog and file a growing stack of reports, witness statements, and dead ends. The files, once a vibrant testament to a community galvanized by tragedy, became a dusty chronicle in a quiet corner of a state office, an open wound left to scar over, but never truly heal. Resources were consistently redirected to more active cases. The Peterson file remained open but unseen, a ghost in the system. For Sarah Peterson, the passage of time was a cruel paradox. Each anniversary of their vanishing, October 15th, became a ritual of remembrance, a day of profound sorrow. Initially, she marked it with public pleas, continuing to hire private investigators and meticulously poring over newspaper clippings, her apartment slowly filling with files and theories. The years wore on, however, and the relentless cycle of hope followed by gnawing disappointment began to chip away at her resolve. Her relationship with Arthur's sister, Martha, strained under the weight of shared grief and differing coping mechanisms, Martha eventually advocating for Sarah to let go while Sarah felt compelled to remember. Lily's childhood friends, now adults with their own families, would occasionally reach out, their memories of Lily tinged with a wistful sorrow, but the shared experience of childhood innocence lost had faded with time, leaving Sarah increasingly isolated in her enduring grief. Hope, once a burning ember, had long since consumed itself, leaving only the cold ash of resignation, a hollow space where a daughter and a marriage once resided. The advent of the internet in the late 1990s brought a strange, new life to the Peterson case. Dedicated online forums and amateur investigative websites sprang up, dedicated to cracking the mystery of the girl and her father who vanished from the Oregon coast. Podcasts like Echoes of Seabreeze and the Peterson Silence dissected every shred of evidence, spawning an array of theories. Some were grounded in the original evidence: a staged abduction, a complex murder-suicide, a deliberate escape from mounting debts Arthur didn't share. Others veered into the fantastical: alien abduction, a clandestine government experiment, Arthur and Lily stepping through a portal in the dense coastal fog. These online communities, fervent in their pursuit of truth, often blurred the lines between serious investigation and morbid entertainment. Sarah, initially drawn to the online discussions in a desperate search for solidarity, found herself increasingly disturbed by the sensationalism, the reduction of her profound loss to mere speculative fodder. The constant barrage of theories, often contradictory and fueled by incomplete information, offered no solace, only further confusion. Fueled by the rekindled public interest and Sarah's unwavering commitment, private investigators were occasionally hired, their efforts paralleling online enthusiasts. One private detective, specializing in cold cases, spent nearly a year re-interviewing witnesses, focusing on the Johnsons' accounts and local rumors, ultimately finding nothing new. Psychics claimed to sense Arthur's presence, leading Sarah on wild goose chases to remote locations that yielded only disappointment. A group of urban explorers, amateur sleuths fascinated by rural mysteries, even attempted a private excavation on the property surrounding Seabreeze, citing Arthur's journal entries about feeling watched, a move that resulted in minor property damage and further estrangement from the local authorities. Each renewed effort, each consultation with a theorist, or each hopeful expedition into the woods was a financial drain and an emotional roller coaster, beginning with a flicker of possibility and invariably ending in the familiar, crushing weight of silence. The cycle of anticipation and dashed hope became a defining characteristic of life in the shadow of the Peterson disappearance. Decades after the initial event, the Peterson case had transitioned from a headline-grabbing news story to a local legend, a ghost story whispered in coastal towns. Seabreeze, rebuilt and repurposed over the years, eventually passed through various owners, each unaware or indifferent to the tragedy that had once unfolded on its bluffs. Yet, the story persisted. Occasionally, a new batch of Oregon State Police detectives would dip into the cold case files, drawn by its sheer impossibility, applying new analytical techniques to old evidence, or re-examining witness statements with a fresh perspective. A grainy photograph, purportedly showing a man resembling Arthur near a different coastal town weeks after the disappearance, surfaced and was rigorously investigated, only to be debunked as a similar-looking individual on vacation. These intermittent ripples of renewed interest would inevitably subside, leaving the case submerged once more. The mystery of Lily and Arthur Peterson had become an indelible part of the coastal landscape, a somber reminder of nature's power and humanity's enduring capacity for the inexplicable, a stillness that had settled over everything, pregnant with the untold. The year 2025 dawned like any other, the Oregon coast bracing for a typically damp and overcast January. Down at what was once the lauded Seabreeze rental property, now slated for demolition and redevelopment, a small crew of workers were dismantling the last vestiges of the old structure. Under a leaden sky, with a persistent drizzle misting the air, one of the laborers, a gruff local named Hank, was prying loose the warped floorboards of the master bedroom. Around 10:17 a.m., his crowbar struck something solid that wasn't wood or rusted nail. It was a distinct clunk, followed by the scrape of metal on metal, a sound entirely alien to the decaying beach house. Hank paused, his heart giving a curious lurch, and chipped away at the surrounding detritus. He unearthed a small, tarnished metal box, clearly hidden with intent, its surface caked in decades of dust and embedded sand. The discovery was entirely accidental, a consequence of routine demolition work, yet the weight of it, buried for nearly half a century, felt immense in the damp, quiet air. Carefully, Hank gingerly lifted the box. It was heavy, perhaps 8 by 10 inches, with a corroded latch that resisted his initial attempts. He saw no immediate connection to the house's original fixtures, no clear purpose. Yet, there was an undeniable air of secrecy clinging to it. He pried it open with more force, a small groan of protest from the aged metal. Inside, nestled within what looked like oilcloth that had largely disintegrated, were several items. A thin, leather-bound journal, its pages swollen and warped but surprisingly intact, lay open to a page filled with cramped handwriting. Beside it, a child's drawing, rendered in faded crayon on brittle paper, depicted two stick figures, one taller, one smaller, standing near a crudely drawn house. Looming behind them, however, was a monstrous, dark figure, its form undefined but undeniably menacing, rendered in thick, black crayon. Beneath the drawing, a small, metallic object glinted dully. It was smooth, cylindrical, and strangely heavy for its size, unlike anything he'd ever seen from his era, let alone from the 1970s. The overall condition suggested a deliberate sealing, protecting the contents from the elements as best as possible, yet the sheer age was palpable. Hank, his blood running cold despite the drizzle, immediately recognized the historical significance of the Seabreeze property and the hushed whispers that had always surrounded the Peterson disappearance. He set the box aside, his hands trembling slightly, and called his foreman, who in turn contacted the local sheriff's department. Within the hour, the familiar sight of patrol cars marked the end of a quiet morning. Sheriff Miller, a man who had heard the Peterson legend recounted countless times, arrived on site. He took one look at the contents of the box, particularly the journal and a metallic object, and felt an immediate, sharp jolt of recognition. The handwriting on the journal's page, when he carefully held it under better light, mirrored Arthur Peterson's signature on a long-extinct building permit he'd seen during the initial 1977 investigation. The child's drawing, so innocent yet so chilling, sent a shiver down his spine. He ordered the scene immediately cordoned off, ensuring no one else touched the items, and contacted the Oregon State Police, requesting immediate assistance from their cold case unit and their forensics division. The verification process began methodically, with careful photographic documentation before the items were bagged and tagged, a protocol honed over decades of preserving evidence. The discovery sent waves of shock and disbelief through the OSB's cold case unit. Detective Isabella Rossi, who had inherited the Peterson file years ago and found it an insurmountable enigma, was summoned to Seabreeze. Upon seeing the unearthed items, and particularly after a preliminary FBI analysis confirmed the metallic cylinder was an advanced surveillance device with components far beyond 1977 technological capabilities, the case was no longer merely open. It was explosive. Files that had gathered dust for 48 years were pulled from their shelves, a flurry of activity engulfing the sleepy department. Rossi assembled an emergency meeting, Sheriff Miller, forensic specialists, and FBI liaisons. The implications were overwhelming. Arthur Peterson's journal, once a collection of paranoid ramblings, was now definitive proof of surveillance and indictment of a highly organized, professional operation. The child's drawing, once a child's terror, was now a witness statement to an unseen threat. The technology itself pointed to a level of premeditation and sophistication that dwarfed any theory previously entertained. This wasn't a family lost to accident or a fleeting criminal. This was a calculated, meticulously executed vanishing. Sarah Peterson, now a woman in her late 70s, was notified by Detective Rossi herself. The phone call, delivered with quiet solemnity, brought a renewal of the raw grief she thought she had finally managed to compartmentalize. The decades of agonizing uncertainty, the endless cycle of hope and despair, were now overshadowed by a terrifying new certainty. Her daughter and ex-husband had not simply disappeared. They had been hunted. While the discovery offered the first tangible lead in nearly 5 decades, the confirmation of a high-tech abduction suggested a brutal, predatory force had been at play. A truth far more horrifying than any rumor of a lost fishing trip or accidental fall. News of the discovery rippled through the tight-knit coastal community, sparking a mixture of renewed sorrow and an unsettling anticipation. The quiet legend of Seabreeze was about to transform into a chilling revelation of systematic evil, and everyone knew the true story was about to be unearthed, a story that would forever change how they understood the quiet solitude of their shores. The discovery at Seabreeze sent a jolt through the Oregon State Police's cold case unit, jolting Detective Isabella Rossi from years of methodical file rotting into a sudden, urgent whirlwind. The unearthed journal, child's drawing, and advanced surveillance device immediately reclassified the Peterson disappearance from an intractable enigma into a high-priority operation of unprecedented complexity for a case 48 years dormant. Rossi convened an emergency meeting, summoning Sheriff Miller from the coast, FBI liaisons specializing in advanced technology crimes, and their own forensic team. The air in the sterile conference room crackled with a new energy, a stark contrast to the resigned quiet that had previously defined the Peterson file. Modern forensic technologies, unimaginable in Arthur Peterson's time, were now brought to bear. Advanced DNA analysis capable of extracting degraded samples, spectral imaging to reveal hidden details on the journal's paper, and expert analysis of the surveillance technology's manufacturing origins. A new task force was formed, dwarfing the original ragtag effort, its mandate clear: connect the past to the chilling present, and finally provide answers for a family that had endured decades of agonizing uncertainty. This was not just another lead, it was the definitive opportunity to solve the Peterson mystery, igniting a renewed determination that felt both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. The lab buzzed with focused activity. Forensics meticulously processed the retrieved items. Arthur Peterson's latent fingerprints, dormant for nearly half a century, were cross-referenced against databases, yielding no immediate matches, a testament to the methodical nature of his abductors. DNA analysis of minuscule blood traces found on the journal's warped pages, painstakingly extracted and amplified, provided a genetic profile that, while not immediately identifiable, was a critical piece of the puzzle. The child's drawing was subjected to temporal analysis, identifying specific wax pigments and paper compositions consistent with the mid-1970s, corroborating Lily Peterson's ownership. The surveillance device, a marvel of miniaturized engineering, underwent rigorous technical examination. Its components pointed to an origin sophisticated enough to operate outside standard manufacturing and distribution channels, likely a black market prototype or specifically commissioned clandestine equipment. A thorough analysis of the journal's writing style and content, cross-referenced with Arthur's known architectural notes, confirmed his growing paranoia and provided a chillingly detailed timeline of his final days, pinpointing intervals of intense fear and observation that coincided with the likely planning of the device. Detective Rossi and her team began the arduous task of piecing together a coherent narrative from seemingly disparate fragments. Old testimonies, once dismissed as hearsay or emotional outpourings, were revisited with a fresh, analytical lens. The Johnsons' account of Arthur working on the railing was placed within the device's estimated planting window, suggesting a brief moment of vulnerability. The vague reports from other neighbors about strange lights or unusual vehicles were now contextualized as potential activity from the surveillance team. Arthur's own journal entries, previously interpreted as the ramblings of a stressed architect, were re-examined as evidence of a targeted operation. The seemingly insignificant detail of Barnaby being placed on Lily's pillow and Arthur's wallet and keys left behind, once interpreted as signs of an abrupt abduction, now suggested a meticulously staged scene designed to mimic a voluntary disappearance or an accidental event. The consistent pattern across all revived evidence indicated a highly organized, professional operation, one that had deliberately left a breadcrumb trail of misdirection for nearly 50 years. The cumulative forensic data and recontextualized historical clues painted a terrifyingly clear picture. The surveillance device, identified as a prototype developed by a highly secretive R&D firm with ties to disgraced industrialist Silas Croft, confirmed Arthur's suspicions. Croft, a man Arthur had unwittingly crossed years prior over unethical building practices, had evidently discovered Arthur's coastal retreat. The journal entries detailed Arthur's mounting dread, his conviction that he and Lily were being watched. The DNA analysis, when eventually matched to a low-level operative previously involved in industrial espionage, provided a tangible link. The orchestrated scene at the house, coupled with the advanced technology, left no doubt. This was not an accident, nor a random act of violence. It was a calculated, professionally executed abduction and presumed elimination designed to permanently silence Arthur. The motive was clear: to eliminate Arthur due to information he possessed that threatened Croft's carefully constructed empire. The exact fate of Arthur and Lily remain elusive, their bodies still undiscovered, but their disappearance definitively attributed to Croft's enforcers. With definitive proof in hand, the task force focused on Silas Croft. The accumulated evidence, Arthur's journal detailing his fears, the specific brand of surveillance technology linked to Croft's known associates, and the limited DNA evidence formed the bedrock of a case for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Plans were set in motion for Croft's apprehension, the meticulous operation requiring careful choreography to ensure no evidence was compromised and no witnesses could be intimidated. Detective Rossi contacted Sarah Peterson, her voice heavy with the burden of delivering the long-awaited, devastating truth. The years of speculation were over, replaced by a raw, undeniable confirmation of a terrible act of premeditated violence. The knowledge that her daughter had been deliberately hunted and erased brought a fresh wave of anguish, but also a stark clarity that the mystery was finally solved. The path to justice now laid bare. The next stage would be the culmination of decades of unanswered questions, a final confrontation with the truth and whatever remained of its consequences. The reinforced meeting room at the Oregon State Police headquarters buzzed with a controlled urgency. Detective Isabella Rossi, her face etched with the gravity of her task, directed her team with quiet precision. Sheriff Miller stood stoically beside her, his presence a grounded anchor. The FBI liaison, Agent Davies, confirmed the final tactical plan. Silas Croft, the architect of the Petersons' protracted nightmare, reclined in the opulent living room of his coastal estate, oblivious to the net tightening around him. Just as Rossi greenlit the operation, a coordinated team, equipped with the latest surveillance technology and armed with definitive arrest warrants, moved in on Croft's estate. Croft, accustomed to evasion, offered little resistance, his arrogance melting into stunned disbelief as he was presented with Arthur Peterson's journal, the recovered surveillance device, and the specific DNA evidence. His initial blustering dissolved as the cold, hard facts of his meticulously orchestrated crimes were laid bare. Simultaneously, the forensic team, working under a court order, meticulously processed the grounds of Croft's estate, their search for Arthur and Lily's final resting place beginning in earnest, a summer hope propelling their painstaking efforts. Detective Rossi personally delivered the news to Sarah Peterson. The conversation, held in Sarah's quiet Portland apartment, was fraught with the weight of decades of unanswered questions. Rossi spoke with measured compassion, detailing Arthur's final entries, the chilling precision of the surveillance, and the undeniable evidence linking Silas Croft to their abduction and presumed deaths. Sarah listened, her hands clasped tightly, tears streaming down her face, a complex tapestry of horror, grief, and a grim sort of relief washing over her. The confirmation that Lily and Arthur hadn't simply been lost, but had been deliberately targeted and erased, was a devastating blow, yet the end of the agonizing uncertainty was a solace of its own. She clutched a worn photograph of Lily laughing, a fragile beacon in the storm of renewed sorrow. Rossi and her team offered not platitudes, but a deep, shared understanding of loss, assuring Sarah that Arthur and Lily's story would not be forgotten. The legal ramifications for Silas Croft were swift and significant. Armed with the irrefutable evidence, prosecutors pursued charges of conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. While the disappearance of Arthur and Lily meant their physical remains remained undiscovered, the compelling narrative pieced together by forensic evidence, Arthur's detailed journal, and Croft's captured operational parameters was enough to secure a plea bargain, a tacit admission of guilt, and a sentence that would see him spend the remainder of his life in prison. The trial, widely covered by national media outlets, cast a harsh public spotlight on the dark side of corporate greed and the chilling lengths to which power could extend. The community of Seabreeze, once a backdrop to a quiet mystery, now grappled with the profound implications of a calculated act of evil that had shattered their perceived isolation. The case prompted a statewide review of historical building codes and the protocols for handling cold cases, emphasizing the importance of preserving even seemingly insignificant details in vulnerable locations. Years later, the memory of Arthur and Lily Peterson remained a poignant presence. A memorial garden, funded by contributions from across the state, was established on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a place of quiet contemplation for Sarah and the wider community. The Seabreeze property, redeveloped with enhanced security and historical preservation protocols, served as a constant reminder of the darkness lurking beneath peaceful facades. The Peterson case became a cornerstone in cold case investigation training, highlighting the crucial role of advanced technology and the enduring value of meticulous record-keeping, even in the absence of immediate breakthroughs. Sarah, having found a measure of peace, dedicated her later years to advocating for victims' rights and supporting families facing similar unresolved tragedies. The lost innocence of that autumn weekend became a powerful emblem of vulnerability, a testament to the enduring strength of familial love, and a stark reminder that the truth, however painful, is always worth pursuing. The story of Lily and Arthur Peterson, the girl and dad who vanished from their beach house, resonates as a profound testament to the human spirit's capacity for both incredible cruelty and unwavering resilience. Their disappearance, born from Arthur's unwavering love and Lily's bright innocence, was a tragedy that spanned decades, a silent question etched against the vastness of the Oregon coast. The eventual unearthing of the truth, a chilling echo from the past, underscores the critical importance of bearing witness, of never ceasing the search for answers, and of the hope, however faint, that even in the deepest shadows, light can eventually break through. Their story is a powerful reminder of our shared humanity, urging us to remain vigilant, to empathize with those who suffer, and to always champion the pursuit of justice, for in doing so, we honor the lives that were lost and strengthen the bonds that hold us together. If you found this story impactful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more investigations that delve deep into the mysteries that shape our world.